What happens here? Welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, as I've mentioned before, I have created a thing once or twice in my life. I've made businesses from scratch. I have made sales systems. I've created a lot of things. And in doing so, I have gained a certain level of knowledge of how things should be run, how to treat people, and stuff of that nature. Some of it's very technical, some of it's broad, but nonetheless, I've gotten a very good sense of what's actually effective and what is not, and what is 100% not effective. I know that from some firsthand experience. So, where my question comes around to, and kind of the guiding of today's episode, is with this level of knowledge and expertise, I kind of still go out, especially when I'm looking to build in a new industry that I've never done before. Like, how do other people do it, and what are they doing that's successful? And one of the places I go to is the internet. For better or worse, I go there to just see what are people trying in this space, what makes this, aside from the product, what makes this sales structure unique. So I go there and I explore it, and I gotta tell you, I'm finding things that I know are patently wrong. I have never even sold in this arena, but I know just from a human to human relation, this is wrong. So essentially, where my question is coming into play is, I have a degree of expertise. What is my obligation, if any, to try to correct the stem of this information, which I know is wrong, and maybe even it'll definitely damage someone's company if they implement it. I don't know if it'll damage anyone's soul or anything, but it will definitely not be productive, and it'll be a starting point that if people finish at that point will fail. So what is my obligation as an individual, as a company holder, or can I just be like another guy going down the road and just keeps it moving?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great question. There's a sense of social responsibility or social obligation that you feel. Um, you know, we've talked a little bit about sorry, you just froze up for a second. We've talked a little bit about the Catholic social doctrine, which is built on several principles. The first principle is the infinite dignity of every human person. And another principle is solidarity, that we see ourselves all as part of one human race. Subsidiarity, that the one closest to the situation makes the decisions and takes ownership. And the common good would be another one, where we build up that which we all share. So obvious examples of the common good are things like, nature reserves or interstate highways or something like that. There are a lot of goods that we all share that makes all of our lives better, and we all have to take some responsibility for those. Between the common good and the principle of solidarity, uh, your question falls somewhere in there. Subsidiarity would also apply. Who's ultimately responsible for some of these things? On the one hand, you don't want to just cast it all off to the government. The government should do it. That's certain. The national government is far away from the situation.
Mhm.
Although there is I just learned. I don't know that I realized this before, but uh, the national government, the Congress, only has the power to pass laws that regulate interstate commerce, I guess. I think that's right. Anyway, the national government does have responsibility over interstate things, and they do have the authority to limit and regulate some things that couldn't necessarily be handled otherwise. So, certainly is a place for that. Local government, could handle local things, but then we also want the role of citizens and consumers, those who are involved in the process to play their role as well. There could also be peer pressure or peer support or peer fraternal correction, we would say, that would be applicable if there are business owner to business owner, or we have access to somebody that we know is not doing things totally right, or something is happening under their purview. Maybe we just happen to have friendly relationships with people who are in charge of things that are not going right, let alone criminal or corrupt or negligent or I mean, where people are being hurt, obviously there is somebody needs to intervene. Again, who is the best person to intervene? Who is obligated to intervene? Those are some questions of prudential judgment that there aren't necessarily moral absolutes around some of those things. But to get back to the particular situation of being in a space, part of the question on the internet is like, who do you even intervene with? I mean,
Mhm.
who's even paying attention to a comment that you might make or a correction that you might offer? I mean, like where do you even go for that? And I'd say insofar as you have some connection or some opportunity to correct something, we're better off doing it. And some people are more oriented towards this kind of intervention. One of the things I picked up from Strength Finders, which is a nice kind of assessment of personal talents, is fixing problems is at the bottom of the list for me. It's really draining for me. Other people get a lot of energy out of fixing problems, out of repairing things, out of doing that good work. So I'd say, especially if you're the kind of guy that is willing to step in and it gives you energy, it's not just a draining nuisance. Then stepping in for some of these things is great. We don't want to necessarily compromise other responsibilities that we might have. If your houses are collapsing because you're so busy fixing people's problems in other realms, that's a different issue.
Mhm.
So there's a balance of goods in all of that we have to weigh our various responsibilities and then make a prudential judgment about how much energy to invest and what the return on investment will be from some of that work. So and that doesn't exclude the importance of discernment and prayer. I mean, if I were your spiritual director, I would say, well, what happens when you bring that up with God? What happens in your heart? What's the Lord saying to you there?
Perfect. And essentially, Father, you are my spiritual director, so let's not discount that. I did. So I mean, when I think about topics, I don't come up with them as soon as I sit down in the chair, be like, "Oh, Father's going to be here in 3 minutes. What are we going to talk about today?" But so when I was thinking about it, and it wasn't even with the knowledge that you said there, that the final part of the Catholic teachings for social doctrine is for the common good. I believe that competition through capitalism is the perfection of that, at least in the American society, because I had to create a better product that will inevitably make someone want it, which typically means it will benefit someone's life or be more efficient. So obviously there's exceptions to that rule, but in general, coming out and making a safer car then makes all of the other car industry step their game up to make safer cars, and now less people die in car crashes, that type of thing. And that those types of innovations are boundless. They're created every day and they're great. I think they're fantastic. So partially my thought process is look at these bad things that are being taught and just don't implement them into my system. And because I'm not carrying around the weight of bad ideas and horrible execution of bad ideas, I will just inevitably surpass what this bad idea is. And particularly the one that has been standing out to me because of how wrong it is, has been this notion of quota systems for hiring, that we're looking at artificial metrics that have nothing to do with the individual's talent of performing the task, but they have to look a certain way, and that's why you need to have a quota system. And I can tell you from discernment, maybe someone has heard me on another person's show and is coming to Father and Joe for the first time, that a quota system to me is a pure violation of the virtue of justice. To me as a business owner, as an employer, it is my justice to hire someone based upon their merit and what I think that they will do for this position and for this workplace. At the end of the day, it has to be a combination of those two things. Are you going to be able to take your ball and run with it? And are you going to be making the team at least equal to what it is now, if not better? I can't have someone who's going to drag down the team. If at the end of the day they're only barely, it's a little bit of an equation there. Like if you're being like really good at something and the best in the world at it, maybe I'll tolerate some more hindrances because on the net the team is getting better because of your individual performance. But overall, I believe that the best employee is someone that makes the team better and is at or above what reasonable expectations are for that position, because the team as a whole should be greater than the sum of all of its parts when it's built correctly. And when you're looking at someone just from a quota system, that doesn't take any of what I just said into equation. I don't think that the way a person looks should ever be factored into it. It's just, where are you at? What are you bringing to the table, and will it help the team or not? And to me, trying to push this agenda of you need to have X percentage of your company look like this, that, or the other is a surefire way to fail. And the more and more companies have gone into it, the more and more they're learning that. So, but it sounds really good on a poster to say that, we hired this many, that people and that, but never look at the results of the value of your company declining. So that is kind of the driving force of where I've been seeing this flaw the most. And this is from a management level. Because if you have someone hired and the rest of your team knows that they're not capable, but they're only hired because of this external factor, whatever it may be, then it's not going to be a good workplace environment. Even if the external factor is he had a lot of money and basically bought himself into this company. Well, that's not good either. I mean, it doesn't matter what the external factor is. It's got to be based upon the merit. And to me, it's a violation of the virtue of justice. I might have the wrong explanation of why it's wrong, but to me, that's how it feels as when I've sat down and tried to discern thinking about this. And it's also an article that to try to communicate with doesn't seem profitable to me at all, because all I'm going to get is essentially lies thrown back at me that people have been indoctrinated into. So to me, it seems like I don't even feel like running into this brick wall. I'll just put you out of business and keep it moving. So I don't know if that's a good mentality or not, but that's where I feel like I'm at.
Well, I'm happy to think through this with you, Joe, and my thoughts are a little bit half baked, so I'll say that up front. But the first thing that occurred to me, and I think the two ideas are connected, is you said capitalism is the, kind of, I forget what you said it exactly, but kind of the fullest expression of the common good, because if you have a better idea, it'll put other people out of business. So that's true only insofar as there's a fair playing field.
Yes.
And that's where, government, just as one kind of clear example, steps in to break up monopolies, because other people can't actually get into the market and get a fair hearing, viewing, etc.
Mm-hmm.
If there's already a kind of big beast there that's controlling the whole market. Likewise, there can be collusion in some ways that prevents some of that from happening for the sake of everyone's profit. Theoretically, if you had somebody who figured out how to whatever, produce an engine, a car engine that was 50 times more fuel efficient, and maybe there's some pressure to not produce that engine because that'll drive a bunch of other cars out of business and the gas industry and a lot of other things, and so there's pressure not to, do something. Anyway, there are different influences, factors that can reduce the playing field and thus eliminate fair competition. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and and then that would be a detriment, because I don't know how you rank in terms of size compared to other groups, but we'll say you're in charge of a smaller company, but you actually have a lot of innovation and you have a lot of good ideas, but they don't see the light of day because of other kind of unfair factors. And so maybe the influence you could have, you're not having, because the system is arranged such that you don't get the visibility or the contribution. And furthermore, you might not even have those ideas unless you started to get some of the funding and visibility. You might not have the creative developments unless you were already placed on the fair playing field. So it's not like you were the star athlete who just needed his chance and then, everybody could see how amazing he already was. You don't become that amazing until you get put into the setting and have some of the competition and the opportunity to interact. So just to set that up, and then to look at it in terms of companies, kind of to approach it from a different perspective. Let's not reduce it to race, but let's reduce it to opportunity or visibility. And somebody who has already suffered the injustice of growing up without any of the resources that you had growing up, for example, and grew up even partially homeless on the streets, not with the opportunity for education, in a family where there was a single mother and she struggled with being a drug addict, and maybe there were other half siblings that were involved, and this kind of culture. But this particular person also has the capacity, after some work, to provide some real innovation, and even to be a game changer. So I'm making this a little bit more, stark contrast, just to sort of
Mhm.
build up the case. And so then really collectively, as a society, as a people, as a human race, we should be asking, how can I help this person to realize their potential, which benefits everyone? Now, maybe that person is not going to be as smart or as successful as you, even given the same opportunities, or maybe more so, but
Mhm.
they're definitely not going to be more successful if they can't get out of the cycle of poverty, to use now an overused term. But so how do we pull people out like that? And I guess the sort of affirmative action quota based things, it's like, well, look, what's a metric? That happens a little bit more to, I guess, to like African Americans than to Caucasian Americans. And so if
That's the
we
sales
say,
pitch.
right, right. So, and that may be true. I don't know what the statistics are. I guess I would believe it at face value, although if somebody showed me otherwise, I would believe that too. But anyway, that happens more to this population. So if we, you know, how else do we describe that? Well, I think a more fair, you could have other descriptions that are really like those who are already suffering the injustice of a lack of opportunity. For you to find ways to employ them benefits everybody. Now, it also can be a detriment to you. And I love the ways you describe that. Like if your team feels, why are we lifting this person up? I had to work to get here. This
Mhm.
seems unfair. Uh, and the whole team needs to be on board in some sense of, yeah, we're going to make this effort. And maybe it's going to drag us down to a certain degree at first. Maybe it provides a great benefit eventually as we really win someone over. I mean, when you bring healing, and I can speak to this very personally. I mean, I work with people who have suffered a great deal in terms of abuse and lack of opportunity and being put down, and a lot of painful things. I mean, they are fiercely loyal to me. I mean, these are these are people who would do a lot of things for me because I've been a real father for them. So,
Mhm.
there can be a positive benefit, but this is where the kind of government heuristic of, okay, how do we push this on the one hand, or how do we reward this on the other hand, or can we use this kind of power of government to motivate industry to help with this social problem? Because the short-term benefit is always going to be, or the short-term result is always going to be a bit of a sacrifice for someone like you. Now, there are people, I forget what the group is in LA, that's, I think a priest. Anyway, they founded a whole industry on like really pulling people out of gangs, employing them and teaching them trades, and then really making a tremendously successful business. I was just looking at another priest, as something called Camden Works, and this priest, Father Jeff Puthoff, founded this tech company. It's basically a tech startup, pulling people off the streets and teaching them, computer programming and how to interact. I don't know all of the things, but basically tech startup kinds of things. And the business is tremendously successful. And he really leveraged this. It takes more effort going in because you've got to repair some humanity,
Mhm.
and you've got to work through some problems. And there are some difficult situations. But in the end, you end up with people whose lives have turned around, and they're more motivated to work harder because life hasn't been given them on a platter than some others. So now he did that out of his Christian faith. And I don't know what kind of government subsidy he may have gotten, some for to help him, do this very good work. So anyway, I think that's the sort of social problem that is trying to be wrestled with, and what's the best approach, I think is a great question. And I'd love to, you know,
Yes.
find positive ways to approach that.
Yeah, so obviously we're coming in from the two different sides. I'm coming in from the manager hiring side, and you're coming in from the individual platform. And so there's two answers to that. First is that in the two descriptions that you built there, um, their goal really wasn't to create the company; it was to create a better employee who then just happened to be able to lift up the company. And at a very initial startup phase, that is fine. But once you get to having an established team, people like to work with their contemporary peers, like also high quality and skilled. Where I really bring into it is that the best way for me to actually know I have the best person is to search from the widest pool possible and then have a very precise needle to get that one, or magnet to get that one needle out of the haystack. But the bigger the haystack is, the more I get the exact needle that I want. So I think it's a challenge that every hiring person has. So is it better to just kind of walk up to whoever happens to be in the room with you at a networking event and hire them, or to use the vast array of the internet and search that way, knowing that, not everything might be ideal. So in my world, we actually don't even look at the person's name or like their date information as far as when they were at college, because then you kind of figure how old they are. We just look essentially at their last 3 to 4 years of employment. What did they do, and where, what was it? And you kind of just looking at that snapshot of someone's resume. If you think about how you built your resume back in the day, that's all we really look at. And we figure out from there who is actually the best and who's not. Don't really care about the fonts or anything like that. In fact, actually, the service we use sends them all the exact same font. So it doesn't matter how much time you spent making yours look pretty. I'm getting an Arial no matter what. So just as a side note, it's because we try to make it as balanced as possible. Then it's just, who is got the skill level and all that. So, but there's also other positions that I've hired because I knew the person from a personal history. We've gone back for years, and I just wanted them to work with me. So where I'm coming from with this is that to join the giant hayfield that we're trying to get our one needle out of isn't that much barrier of an entry. There are tons of websites that essentially are trying to feed people in. But at the other hand, I don't think that at least for my industry, at least my company, I'm not designed to bring people up and take them from mold into where they're at. I basically say we're going to join the team, and as the team, we're going to collectively make everyone better. So, kind of as your example of, we already have the varsity team on the field. We just need another running back that we think will be able to get an improvement on what we have. Or it's a totally new arena, and we're going to find out how it works. And sometimes that stuff works, sometimes it doesn't. It's the nature of a startup. So I guess I look at it from this side of, at the end of the day, in this modern world, all of us have a phone that can get on the internet. And if not, you can get one for free that can get you on the internet. And therefore, we can go onto these resume upload sites, which is free for the applicant, to start this process. It to me, having a quota system that would force me to hire someone that doesn't necessarily want to go through this process isn't profitable for anyone. I'd rather have someone who's able to try to step up. And now the joy, and I guess that this is the internet based way, probably very watered down and less personal than what the two priest examples you gave, but they'll give you feedback and say, you know what, based upon your experience, if you would try this, that, or the other to improve yourself, you're way more likely to get this type of job or whatever. So there is like constructive criticism and all that. I don't know, that's criticism, just advice to progress yourself. So I guess that's where I'm looking at is where is my duty? I find my duty being, as you said, to the smallest decision maker, to my team. We have to make ourselves better and more ultimately profitable, because if we're profitable, we'll be able to hire more people, test new arenas, And it also gives a much level of stability, meaning that we don't have to worry about whether the company will still be alive next month. There's this bedrock of profits where everything's going to be okay and cool, and just a calm that can be around the team, because living in financial stress as a company is a surefire way to break it. It'd be like dropping a goldfish ball off a two-story building and hoping all the water stays inside. That's basically what living inside of a stress of, are we going to be around tomorrow, ends up being like. Let alone what happens to the poor little goldfish when you drop it off the top of a building. So that's kind of the analogy here. So to me, it is a real problem. I mean, I see what you're saying, that there's people out there who are willing to go out and improve themselves. But I also question, and this is from the business owner, and this is not to be cold, it might be even contrary to Catholic, but how often does that actually happen? Most people get to a state, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, and just kind of chill there. That they hit autopilot and go through. That's part of my question is as a business owner, I've seen that. Basically where people come in at, they might go a half a step higher, half a step lower, but basically, if someone's a 7 in terms of production, they're going to be a 7 for as long as they stay here, as long as we do some things right. We can really implode and take them down to a 4, but normally they stay around the 7. Or if the rest of my team's a bunch of 8s, they'll step up to an 8. But normally it's that same zone, if that makes sense. So those are the from the direct life of me as being a business owner, experiences and questions I propose in relation to your comments.
Right, and we're talking about two related but not certainly the same things. And
Yeah.
the principle of solidarity in Catholic social doctrine is that um, it's not enough to simply take care of my own sphere. So I have also a responsibility for everyone in the human race. Obviously, I have more direct influence on people that are in my more direct influence. And
Mm-hmm.
so then it's really a proposal of, you know, accepting your critique about, and I don't even know what the quota systems are necessarily that you're referring to. I'm out of touch enough to not be paying attention to the details there, but
Mm-hmm.
accepting your critique that those quota systems end up undermining companies, I can totally see that. Then the contrary push is, well, what do we do? How do we help to find employment and help to build people up? And is it just a couple of creative priests that are the only people that are going to do this, or are there other people with capital, influence, power, opportunity who can also find ways? And then recognizing, well, that's an extra ask, and so what way should that be compensated or supported, or and I mean, our college does a lot of recruiting also in underserved populations. And I see uh, young men and women who didn't have the opportunities, who did grow up homeless half the time, and who grew up in very unfortunate family situations. And as I say, it has, uh, at its outset, it is a negative feedback loop, because when you're in a very stressful situation, your body is filled with cortisol. You're in fight or flight mode most of the time, and you don't develop the kinds of bonds of affection and social
Mm-hmm.
engagement that are necessary for healing and growth. And so, sort of saying, well, those people are never going to amount to anything. Well, that's the best way to make sure that they never amount to anything. You're not saying that, but that kind of attitude is kind of reinforces the problem. So somebody has to take the first step, and who should do that, and how do we do that, what's the best way to do that? And there's isn't a one size fits all. I mean, different demographics are in different situations. Employment has to be part of it. It's kind of like the problem of criminals and coming out of jail. Nobody wants to hire an ex-con for all kinds of reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but then what do you end up doing? You end up just creating more convicts, because ex-cons become criminals again. And so anyway, these are the kinds of social problems that I certainly identify with you. I mean, I only have a couple of employees working for me at the Institute for Ministry Formation, and when I can only hire a couple of employees, my first thought is not to hire employees that are going to require a ton of my time and energy, which I don't have. I
Mm-hmm.
need to I need people that can further the mission sooner rather than later. Now, hopefully, part of the service that we do is reaching out in some sense to underserved populations or supporting people who do. So, anyway, just a reflection back to what you were saying, and these are really useful discussions. I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I hope that they end up helping people and help other people with their businesses out there. So we thank everyone for listening, and we'll be with you again here next week.